Friday, and Friday is the Tile Happy Hour. And the Tile Happy Hour is where you are right now. If you're lost, we found you. We found you at Happy Hour. This is the place where we come and we talk about tile, and we have a good time and conversation. And I am now joined by my friend John, and also by popular demand, the drink cam. John, cheers.
You know, let truth be told, that's your real friend, the drink cam.
That's right. Cheers, John.
Cheers.
John, it's been a week. And as you know, as we got ready to prepare for the thing today, it ran right up into this episode. And I don't know if you can tell on the camera, I am sweating and I have the air on 65 degrees down here in Raleigh, North Carolina. And I don't have any pants on. Well, I mean, I got pants on, but you know what I mean? No long pants.
Gotcha.
I was sweating today.
You know what? We get a little complacent and we think all the tech is going to work. And then we jump on, a few minutes later than normal and say everything's going to go as normal. And shit hits the fan. But
we're live. There's no normal when you're working with technology, internet, AT&T, Spectrum, Verizon, whatever you've got. If you're counting on it, you're probably going to get let down.
Yeah, here in New York, we have Optimum on Long Island, Optimum Cable. And Single is strong today. I'm really excited because spring has sprung. Really happy about daylight coming, staying on a little later, about an hour, I think.
Absolutely.
And it's really, it's good. It's good for the soul. It's good for the spirit. And I feel that we really avoided a true winter here in New York this year. I mean, we had one snowstorm barely to speak about, which is completely unheard of. So once in a while, we deserve that here. I don't know. How's the weather by you?
My tulips have grown and sprouted, or whatever you call them, blossomed. But I will say I'm married to a teacher, and she was definitely upset that there were no snow days.
Oh, really?
Can I get a shout out in the comments if you like snow days? Because, we love here. We don't get snow that often, not like you do up north. But we normally have one decent snow where we can sled for an afternoon, and then it's gone by the next day. There's been 1,700 car wrecks because nobody down here can drive in it. But we missed it this year, unless it's coming in April. I guess we missed it.
We're safe. I do remember as a kid a few major snowstorms, like right before Easter or during Easter. Very rare, but that was quite some time ago in the 70s. You know what's really interesting is, you see all this weather in California. I mean, I know California is vast and broad and a lot of different elevations and geographic differences, but they look like they had a rough time this year, and we were just coasting through. I'm happy about New York.
Agreed. Yeah, it's been very mild. Well, we're going to start this week as we do most weeks. We want to just tell you this is your show. If you've got some tile stuff you want to talk about, jump in the comments. Let us know where you're where
in the world you are,
from.
Right?
Yeah, where you watching from, and we'll get to them live. If you're watching on a broadcast, just put in the comments that you love where you are. Put where it is, and we'd love to hear from you. And John, we have a couple of different things going on. We know we have coming up. I'm going to grab my background. Coverings is coming up in a few weeks, and we have been lucky enough to be invited to participate in the live podcast there on site, and super excited about that. That is in Orlando. And John, how cool is that?
Yeah. So we just started this podcast. This is our 5th episode. And as we got started, we're like, yeah, well, you know what? I think Coverings has a live broadcast, podcast booth. So next year, let's see what's involved. Next thing you know, they invited us to participate, and we are there Tuesday at 1:15 p.m. on the 18th in the main hall. Well, it's Orlando, so it's one main hall, kind of when you're entering. So Craig and I will be there. So if you are in Orlando coming up at the Covering show, this is going to be a phenomenal show. I was speaking to some factory today, and there have been some people in the industry because of COVID, have not been to show in 3 or 4 years, literally. And I know coming off some of the shows like the National Kitchen and Bath and Industry Show just wrapped up, and I was record numbers there. There's a whole bunch of other industry shows going on, and there's a lot of buzz about trade shows this year, and Coverings is the place to be for tile, stone, glass, anything tile.
Tools, accessories, yeah.
Tools and accessories. Yeah, there's a lot of great, you know what? That's right up your alley. I think one of my favorite things about those shows is all those live like competitions or demonstrations. Do they have like a competition or something going on this year? They have.
Yeah, I read through it, and normally every year, CTEF and TCNA, they're actually qualifying tile setters there. Qualifying is probably not the right word, but you can get a certification to become a certified tile installer. And over the last few years, and I believe this year also, they have those classes live there. And what's cool about it, and nerve-wracking for the installers, but you can watch them install, and it's not just a multiple choice test. They have to actually install a 3x3 shower with the proper cuts, the proper techniques. All those things are done live there. And if you're not familiar with that, go to TCNA or CTF to figure out where you can get certified if you're a tile installer. It will help your business.
You know what?
Say that again. It will help your business. You can charge more when people can prove that you know what you're doing.
Well, that's a good point, because people always ask, know your worth, right? And charge appropriately. And, there's no bottom to the industry. There's always the one guy who's willing to do it for less. And we've all seen those fails, sometimes on Fridays, but we've seen those fails where, the labor part, the tile part of the job is many times not the biggest cost of the job. It's the preparation, it's the installation, and then the material. Yeah, you want the best quality material that's going to perform the way you want. But God forbid you have a bad installer because you saved $1 a foot or whatever. The ramifications are mind-blowing, because now you have a failure. Now you have to rip up. You got to re-prepare or recreate the substrate, buy new material, buy new setting material, and find the original guy who quoted you the right price, who probably won't take the job now just because he's smirking that you didn't give him the job, and it's bad. So yeah, I really condone that people you'll get educated. Whether you get certified, that's great, because it's just some validation that you're meet minimum requirements of being a tile installer. And every state and every municipality has different things. Sometimes, most of the times, you just need to be a contractor just so they know you're insured. But you need to know they know what they're doing. And so,
and right now with the internet, there's a lot of free information out there. You can learn. I mean, I'm studying to be a nuclear physicist because I figure they may need my help down at the power plant, and I'm just going to go down there. You can learn anything on the internet, and
I'm worried.
Invest in yourself. That I think that's the key. That's where we're going. Invest in yourself, and at Coverings this year, you'll have that opportunity. If you can't make it, there are things in your area. I just threw away a calendar that I got sent for trainings all over the country, and when you have your name on one of those lists as a trained tile professional, you can charge more, and you've got something to show a prospective client, and that always helps you out.
True, and charging more doesn't even necessarily mean you're overcharging. It's just charging what you should be getting, like, because you feel compelled to bring in a lower price, but here you could stick to your ground. So
yeah,
that's good advice.
I have a friend who's tearing out a shower right now. They've got a 3-year-old house. And this off the subject, but on the subject of doing it right, they nailed nails below the water line of their shower pan, and they didn't notice it. And unfortunately, the general contractor's warranty was a year. So when he took it apart and found out it was leaking, it's been leaking from day one, but they didn't see it. And just do the right thing. Follow the proper techniques, and you can learn that at Coverings. And by chance, we'll be there. John, I'll be his security because he's the popular guy, and pushing him back and making sure that you can get your autograph. Bring your Sharpie. I think John may even have some stuff to give away while we're there if you want to come see us.
Yeah, there could be something happy hour related. So yeah, we'd love to see you guys. We'll be walking the show floor.
Absolutely.
We'll be at the podcast booth on that Tuesday, and we'll also be checking out some really specific stuff at various manufacturers, from materials to tile products, and we'll be interviewing some people as well live. So it'll be really cool. We're excited.
We're going to come back with a ton of content.
Yeah, I'm excited. Speaking about content, so today we're talking about something really cool, because when you hear tile, right, usually people think of your kitchen floor, your bathroom, shower, wall. Yes, absolutely. But there's a whole nother world that is just huge, and it's the cladding of buildings with something, right? Tile, wood, metal, stone, whatever. You need to put something, stucco, on the front of your building, be it a commercial building or residential house. And at least in America, I'm not sure of the different parts of the country, but it's not incredibly popular yet. And we wanted today to focus on facades, and we want to talk about a few different things about facades. What's your experience with facades?
Well, I've got some experience, which is cool. And I got really excited about this topic a few years ago. And because it was just coming in to being able to embed like the keel anchor, if you're familiar with that, if you know what I'm talking about, drop keel down in the contents. But that was a very specific and revolutionary anchor that you could put in a 1 centimeter tile, then you can mechanically fasten it to the side of a building. And I was like, as the contractor, you get all this square footage. We measure not our worth, but how much business we do by the square foot. And I was thinking to myself, you imagine how many square feet are on the outside of a building? It's a ton. Yeah. So I was really excited about this opportunity. And I knew that in Europe, it was a big deal. And there was tons of products that the Europeans were putting out, and they were pushing it, but we were running into all sort of roadblocks, and we can talk about that in a minute. But speaking of products, John, did you have a product highlight this week?
Yes, I did. It is Friday, and every Friday I do my product highlight, my little happy hour product. And today was at the studio at Tile Bar, and if we can show it, I'd love to show it.
Yeah, I'll show it. Can we put it on the outside of a building?
This you can. Yes.
All right, let's look at it.
Hey, it's John Tedisco. Guess what? It's Friday, and it's happy hour all day today at Tile Bar. There's a product called Color One that I previously talked about. It has many different features to it. This particular one is a focus on the glazed version, the lava stone. So this is the Arctic Blue, and you can see we have this situated in a stack pattern all the way up. Here is the exact same tile, but we took the stack, we turned it horizontally, and then we offset it. Really interesting way to install it. And you can see all the different characteristics, the irregular edges on the tile, the crackling, the pooling of the glaze, and the shading of the tile. Gives us like a lot of light. It's available in many colors. Here's a few others. There's a blue, a rose, a white, a gray. It's about 10 colors all together. This is John Tedisco. I'd like to wish you a happy hour. So that's a great product. It's a lava stone that's glazed, and I visualize that like on a restaurant, first floor, ground level. It's not something I would necessarily think you'd want to tile a whole building. There's a lot of grout, small.
What surprises me about that product, and I've seen that before, it's so dense. It is a dense stone, and I love it. I think the glaze on it is really unique. If you remember back in the day, schools and some government buildings were built with a glazed CMU block. That's kind of what the vibe I get from it.
Well, and I picture that like Capri Green from 1960.
Yes, yes,
right. It's just Reed's institution now, right? If you see that.
Hey, Sonia, good to see you in Colorado. I bet Colorado got snow.
Yeah, I'm sure.
And Jim, I think Jim, he believes in me. I can be a nuclear physicist.
Yeah.
Thanks, Jim.
You know what? I think the best way to get that degree, Craig, is Photoshop a certificate, hang it on your wall. You got tile stuff you got to worry about.
Yeah, the Photoshop. I probably can handle that. That would be an easier deal.
You're qualified.
Easier.
Well, speaking of easier, some contractors do jobs, and sometimes they take the shortcut, and sometimes they want to cut a tile with a handsaw, but it's marble. And
I know where you're going with this, John.
Today is Friday, and I know in your world, when you're out shopping with the family and you step into that public restroom, they find you. These Friday fails find you, and I'm wondering today what's going on with your Friday fails.
Here you go. Oh! Cutting tiles can be difficult, but you got to keep trying and use the right tools. Perfect. If you don't get the look you want, just keep trying. Believe it or not, that was an actual question I got this week. Why is this tile cutting like this? Now, I embellished a little bit. I don't know how they cut it. They did not divulge how it was cut.
Chainsaw.
That's what I thought the first time I saw it. I was like, oh my gosh, this is terrible. You can't use it. And so that was today's Friday fail. And yes, they do find me. So, and as I said at the end of the video today, if you have a Friday fail, look me up, send it to me, however you want to, Twitter, all of our social medias at Tile the World. You can find me there. I love to look at those things, diagnose them, and figure out that I do that day in and day out for our tile bar team, and I love it. Love my job, and it's been fun. John, when we started talking about exterior facades, I got excited because I've had some experience with that, and I've also had some questions this week that was, hey, can I put this outside? Can I do this outside? And I think when you and I were discussing it and talking about it, COVID really showed us that when we're confined to our home, as a lot of us were, we want extra space. And even though we're not necessarily facades or patios, but a lot of the people that were confined there did home projects to extend their living area outside of their house proper. And so we get questions about that all the time. And what have you seen that? I know that right before, as we're coming out of COVID, you had a couple of things happening in the Hamptons that was exterior based. And tell me about that and how you saw that market expand. And did you have the same experience?
Well, I mean, the biggest thing during the COVID period was amazing how many architects and designers, principals of firms, senior people, all of a sudden we got an influx of business and inquiries about, hey, I'm looking to do this, I'm looking to do that in the Hamptons or in the enclave up in the suburbs up north or Connecticut. And it turns out that they all segued to their personal projects because the world was upside down, and they kind of were able to take a step back and say, all right, it's time for me to look at, my life, time for me to look at my family, what our needs are, what's our future. Everyone's kind of like reevaluating. And plus the fact that, commerce wasn't quite booming per se. A lot of things came to a screeching halt, especially here, we call ground zero in New York, where, it was really everything shut down. So I found a lot of projects going on. And one of the things I found was a lot of people looking to, redo their pavers outside, or instead of putting cement pavers, they wanted to put porcelain pavers. So we did a lot of nice things like that. We should probably talk about that one day in depth. But if you're building a new home, especially you mentioned the Hamptons or East End of Long Island or Westchester, high-end areas, because you need a budget. Natural stone is really hot. on a facade. And when you say facade, I usually think of a commercial building, but facade really means the face of a building, and a building could be a home, right? So we're focusing on facades today, and natural, like a Georgian limestone or Indiana limestone, right? Or something like Rockefeller Center is done in the Georgian limestone. There's a lot, New York Stock Exchange. There's
a lot of buildings where you live that are, top to bottom in stone. I mean, that was, as soon as steel was tempered and able to hold up a building back in, I guess, the early 20s, they were able to cover those buildings with stone. And we've got a big quarry down here in North Carolina and done a ton of it. And I was surprised to see, and we'll get to it later, that has shrunk tremendously over the years with the, I guess, technology.
Well, interesting, like Empire State Building, Indiana limestone, right? So you're building a building, years ago, you needed that structural steel to hold the weight. And the last thing you want is a piece of stone falling off the Empire State Building and, hitting the ground or a person. So they did it right, but there's a significant cost. So a lot of innovations come along. Let's come full circle to like a metal building or EIFS, a stucco building. And, there's all these different types of products. Stone is in one way the ultimate material in looks. There are some maintenance issues because it has some porosity unless it's a granite of some sort.
Yeah.
And then with the technology innovations of porcelains, people really didn't want to put small little pieces of porcelain. So even though porcelain in some cases, or in many cases, had the technical qualities that could be used vertical outdoors because there's no porosity or very little, it was kind of very small. But then there's innovation of what we call the thin gauge porcelains.
Well, let's go back to the small porcelain, because I actually, when we started talking about this, I pulled a project that I just completed.
Oh, really?
Not, it's probably been 7 years.
Nice.
But it was 12 by 24 porcelain. But what was great about it is the designer really designed the building to look like almost like a granite or a limestone, even though that is 12 by 24s with some 6 by or 4 by 24s, I think. Maybe it's 6 by 24s cut as an accent and using bronze metal. And this is a tile facade on a building. And the technology of the waterproofing and the system behind it is what makes it work really well. Now, yes, you've got a lot of grout joints, and nobody likes grout joints. But
that looks nice.
But yeah, it was a great project. I think it was like 8,000 feet, all exterior, all bronze metal on the in corners or out corners, and then all of the movement joints were bronze movement joints, and it was great. It was a chemical company, Arkema, which is I think they're based in Canada, but they have a research down here in North Carolina.
So did you put like 4 little dabs of adhesive on each corner? Is that how you put it up?
Yes. 4 dabs each corner. Push. If you let go and it stays, it'll make the warranty time. That's what you do. But
so how did you install that? That's obviously not a metal system with those anchors, or was it just a direct bond to the?
It was a direct bond. It was a 1/2-inch concrete board. It was a liquid applied waterproofing, and then it was.
What does that mean? Liquid applied.
Liquid applied waterproofing is waterproofing in a bucket. You apply it with a paint roller or a trowel or a brush, and it is an elastomeric membrane in which it does not allow water to transfer in or out of system.
So why would that be bad if you had water behind there?
Mold.
Mold
and mold inside your walls is tough because
bad.
You can't clean it. So that's why the water barrier is there. Now, if your drainage is done in your wall correctly, you don't have to have it. It is not a rule, but
right.
this stuff it works well, and it's relatively inexpensive compared to a problem if you do have water penetration. But
So-
you brought up something about thin gauge panels.
Yeah. So thin gauge, there's thin porcelains, thin gauge panels, has a bunch of names for it. It's been coming up in the industry for the last decade or so or more. But it's now at the point where it's hit a critical mass where every factory that's relevant is producing a technology called thin gauge porcelain. And it's basically producing tile that's super big, 5 foot by 10 foot slabs.
Mm-hmm.
And contrary to what you would think, making it super thin, you would think super big, you want it super thick, right? I don't, it's amazing how they do this. And I'm just baffled on how it works.
It's crazy how it works. And what we'll have to do, we'll have to get one of our vendors here to kind of talk about the process. It is still a porcelain tile, so it's made of the same stuff: feldspar, dirt, clay, all that stuff. And I'm just going off the cuff here, nuclear physicist style. I'm pretty sure it has to do with the press and how strong the press is, and getting it that thin, and then the firing process. And you got to think about it. A tile factory has to be created just for that size.
Oh, absolutely.
Panel. You can't retrofit a 48 by 48 tile press to fit a 60. It just doesn't work. So of course, it started in Italy. You have to build a factory to make this. And it is good. And I will say, I've done it. You can put it on the outside of a building.
Wow.
Cool. This is a building. Rick, I see your comment. We're going to get to that in just a second. Rick wants to know about cost. He wants to know how he's going to spend his money. This bank was built in the 70s. If you look at the bottom picture, you see that old brick, and they wanted to upgrade it, but they didn't want to tear it down. And this was when I was selling and going out there and chasing projects. This was the biggest upside in thin gauge porcelain panels, is the renovation market. We took that old brick, they removed the signs, we pressure washed it, we skimmed the brick, and we put those thin gauge porcelain panels, installed them directly onto that brick facade.
So when you say you skim the brick, so I'm visualizing brick, but then below the surface, the grout lines or the mortar joints, what do you call them in brick? They call them brick grout lines?
Mortar joints, I think.
Mortar joints, sorry. And so you skim it so it becomes more flush.
Right. And you want it, it needs to be flat. And so that's, we spent some time on that because, of course, back in those days, I think they kind of did this and said, yeah, that's flat, that's straight. It wasn't too flat or straight. And when you start putting these pieces were 30 inches by 60, I think. When you start putting them down a wall, you start looking at those lines, you can see them if they're off. So Alex, my installer, he's amazing. He did that project, and he spent twice as much time prepping as he did installing, because the installation is in the prep. Right.
Oh, it's like not like paint, but like paint, right? The painter comes in and they're spending 2 days prepping and 1 day painting.
Exactly.
But you mentioned the size, 30 by 60. So what's really interesting about the thin gauge porcelain, and the reason we're talking about that is because it's a good product to consider for facades, not only because you can direct bond it, but it's also systems that are developed, and we'll talk about that. But you mentioned 30 by 60. So this is the first time in the tile industry where it almost acts like the stone industry. See, tile industry started out with little 4 1/4 tiles, and then 6 by 6, and then 6 by 8, then 8 by 10.
And then, God forbid, they had the huge tile that was 12 by 12. Right. Remember those days?
And so that was like amazing, get bigger and bigger. Now 12 by 24, 24 by 20, 30. But in the thin slab, it actually starts off as the biggest ass tile you've ever seen in your life, 5 foot by 10 foot. And then, and this is where it correlates with the stone industry, they're able to create other formats of that tile, not by producing a 30 inch by 60 inch tile out of the kiln. They're taking that slab and cutting it down. So they're looking at a 5 by 10, figuring out what's the most efficient size, how much without much waste. And 30 by 60 is like a common size. A lot of factories have various sizes, but that's a good
meter
size.
by half meter, right? Or
Yeah, exactly. And it's just really cool how we're starting large and going smaller. And when you're talking about large projects, those slabs could be cut into any size you want. Of course, when you're talking about budgets, you want to still be efficient. But if you wanted 32 and a quarter by 89 and a half, and you wanted 5,000 pieces of it, we can do it. But so all the pictures that you showed us were 1 story high.
Yep.
And I noticed that a lot of specifications, there are a lot of products where it says exterior first level, or I don't know how it's termed. Do you know why they do that? Like, there's actually delineation between first floor and above.
No, I'm not
Okay.
exactly sure. I can guess. I know that when we were doing stuff street level, you would have to have, especially in the stone industry, when I do a stone building, the street level would have to be fully bonded. It couldn't be set with anchors and spot bonded. There is a procedure for hooking anchors, metal anchors into stone, putting an anchor into the building and hooking that together. But what that does is that creates an air pocket, which we'll talk about in a second. But I know the first few courses of the building, you wouldn't want to do it like that, just because
impact.
Paul jumps the curve and touches the building. He breaks the building. So I know that we would do that on the first floor some. And when you got above the first floor, everything was metal anchors and
so it's not less secure up above, but there are scenarios where it's secured very perfectly and it will never go anywhere, but there's a gap behind it. There's air or ventilating behind it. And that's perfectly fine if you're not going to take a shopping cart filled with cinder blocks and run it into the building, where it could create that impact. So, that's pretty interesting.
Yeah, and that goes to, we can maybe skip over to this next slide. That's what you call a ventilated facade building, and those are very popular because a ventilated facade is it saves on costs, operational cost, heat and air. Energy costs. Yes, that's the word I was looking for. I had a great question from LinkedIn, if I can find it, from Keith. His comment was about the cost of it, and the initial cost is up there, but the energy cost savings, it's what do you call it when you your CPA does this to your property. I'm losing all my words today. But anyway, as the building cost
depreciates, I guess.
Appreciates. Yeah. Then your energy cost savings starts cutting into that. And over time, the building will save you money.
Well, that's interesting. And Keith, thanks for that comment. And Florum is a factory started in Italy and has a U.S. presence as well. And they definitely have part of this market under control, where they offer systems, they offer products that are for facades. And are you depicting that brick color? Is that depicting like an existing building material?
That is a like a cinder block material.
Oh, okay.
In certain places they use it's a clay based, but what that is, that's the structural part of the wall, and then you build your facade out from that. And most of the time you have that deep brown stuff is the insulation, and then you normally have an air gap, and then a structure that holds your tile, which all the ones I've used is like an aluminum rail system.
Right.
And then your tile. And they can either slide on, they can clip on, or there's many different attachment points. But what that does, it creates a rain screen, number one. So the rain hits it and it files down the front of it. And if it doesn't go down the front, if some seeps in, it goes down the back.
Yeah, you need to slow down a little. Rain screen sounds really cool. What the heck does that mean?
The rain screen, what that does is it keeps moisture out of your building. And it's the air gap. So the rain hits your building, and you don't always have to have grout joints in a lot of these systems are open. It's an open air system. And so the rain hits it. And, the majority of the rain's going to hit the front of your tile and go right down.
Right.
Some will get in the back, but yet because of that air gap, it's going to go down the back and it's going to evaporate, and you're going to be fine. So that's.
I would imagine it creates some sort of, with the wind, like some sort of vortex where actually if water goes in there, it shoots it down. Like it wants to go down. I wonder, is it open on top? I wonder, is it sealed on top? I wonder how that works.
Normally it's not. I did a hospital. It's probably a 14. I don't remember how many stories it was. It was over 10 stories.
Right.
And it had a 3-inch stone on the front of it that we attached with a rail system. And we had the bottom caulked, and the top was covered with a cap to keep large amounts of water from getting behind it. But I would say a vortex behind it probably is that sounds cool, but it does evaporate.
Well, you're talking about a rain screen but also wind. I'm thinking of, do you ever see when they have like a big banner outside, an advertising banner, and they cut little holes in it to let the wind kind of little flaps? So I'm visualizing if there's a lot of wind coming at this wall, the wind will kind of go between the grout lines where there's no grout, and it will kind of absorb some of that pressure.
Yeah, I would think so. I mean, you've got a couple of buildings right there off of Central Park that are open in different places through the building for that very reason. It takes some of the force away.
So you talk about energy efficiency. So this definitely literally helps keep the building cool in the summer and warm in the winter. It's just amazing how it works.
Absolutely. That the sun, heats it up, but it only heats up that exterior skin and protects you. So it saves on that energy cost and helps you out a lot there. It's what is crazy to me is that it is so innovative, but we struggle in getting it specified in America.
Why?
And I know years ago, and Keith and I had a conversation about it. Years ago, it was all of the engineering was overseas. So everything that you got for it, like the wind resistance or the uplifting and all that stuff, was from an overseas architect, Italy. And our engineers here wouldn't accept it. But nobody wanted to pay to do the tests. So it was like this never-ending circle of, we want it, but. And then, Keith brought up a good point when he and I talked, was a lot of people that are building these really nice buildings, they don't own them long enough to see the savings. They build them, they're a developer, and as soon as somebody offers them money, they buy out of it. So that was.
I was bidding on the Flatiron building, was for sale this weekend. I don't know if you'd heard.
Oh, I didn't hear that.
There was an auction. The Flatiron building has been kind of under foreclosure for the last 3-4 years. There's been scaffolds outside of the Flatiron building for 4 or 5 years, I believe, and people trying to take pictures and look terrible. So it turns out it was auctioned off. I was bidding on it and I maxed out my credit card, and it sold in 45 minutes for $190 million.
Oh, wow. Well, I mean, I know your credit card limit of 5,000 probably wouldn't guarantee that.
But I was thinking about it. I'm thinking $190 million. That's a lot of money. Yes. But I see some homes, you mentioned the Hamptons, you can easily get a home in $20-30 million in the Hamptons. What is that producing? It's not giving you any income, right? Think about $190 million, you get a few friends together or a few thousand, and you put $191 million together, and you own the Flatiron building. So I think there's a missed opportunity,
which is iconic. Maybe we should do a GoFundMe Tile happy hour and see if we can maybe buy it. Maybe it'll go down in price after it's and we can just make a private offer.
Well, maybe he bought it to flip it. Yeah, they're going to flip it maybe. Put a little tile on the outside, and that would be nice to do the exterior of it. Now, there was another question about cost. I know there was cost savings at Keith, but wasn't there another? Oh, okay.
Yeah. Rick said, do you have any on the cost? And so, yes. And I'm getting ready to pull up a chart here because I wanted to see what the percentage of what goes on the exterior. And I did it by commercial building because I think that's more interesting. John, what do you think the number one skin for commercial buildings are in the U.S.?
So
if you have a guess, put them in the comments. What do you think the number one skin for exterior facades are in the U.S.? Drop that in the comments.
Well, before you show the chart,
yep,
somebody has if someone wants to put their guesses in, that's great. But I was surprised when I started to get into exterior facades and speaking to architects. I was really surprised about a material that I had no clue was even being used. And I had no clue that it was actually that popular. And it was the word metal. I was like, metal? I was like, what?
Yeah.
And then I'm interested in knowing about what you found.
Yeah, metal is very popular. And I think America differs a little bit across the country. But yet the cities look the same. You know, you look at any... it comes up on our screen, the screensaver for our Apple TV, this cityscape comes up, and all of us are like, what city is that? They all look the same. It's buildings, and most of them, Rick says he's in for $10. So, well, we got to find some more friends or richer friends. So here's the chart. If I can get it to come up. Here's the chart. So what that shows you is the majority, if you can read it, is glass and aluminum curtain walls.
Now, when you say glass, they actually mean like the windows and but is that considered a facade or I guess the whole building could be glass, right?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I'm trying to think of a building in New York that's all glass. I want to say Trump Tower. Isn't it all?
Yeah. It's all like a copper gold, right?
Yeah, so it's got a substructure, which is the aluminum, similar to the way you would do stone, which is interesting because a lot of these facades that are made in porcelain, the installation is being picked up by the glass guys because the installation is so similar.
Right.
But yeah, that's number one. And what I found, what is so cool about it, or not cool, I don't know. It's the most expensive.
Interesting.
So you know, I know there's different types of glass, and if you're a glass installer, I don't want to make you mad, but glass heats up pretty good. I mean, you sit by your window, you're gonna get hot.
Unless you have the newfangled glass where it's actually turning it into power, where it's absorbing it, right? That's a whole nother animal.
That is a whole, and I bet that's not $150 a square foot.
Yeah, that's definitely not.
So the comparison of the ventilated facade with a porcelain tile is only $50 a square foot compared to $150.
So why would people? Let's forget about the technical part. And there's a lot of, I think when you're building a building, like the first thing when you sit down with an architect, you're like, okay, I want to build a building. Okay. Rick and I get together, we put our chip in our $10 and we want to build a building, right?
Yep.
I think the first thing they ask you is, what kind of building are you? Oh, is it a brick building? Is it a stone building? Is it a glass building? I think that's probably question number 2, right? Probably. First is how many stories? And then second, what is the outside of it going to be? And I did actually meet with an architectural firm in Brooklyn last week, 2 weeks ago. And 90% of that firm, it does exterior work and exterior facades, so all over the world, in Europe mostly. And it's interesting to see the materials that they're using. But I see that there's an aesthetic question, right? Like when you're building a pool, they ask you if you want. We talked about aesthetics. When you're building a pool, do you want it to be green? Do you want it to look blue? There's those questions come up because those things you can control. So when you're building a building, do you want it to look, black with like a black rough stone or a travertine or a limestone, or do you want it to look like Calcutta marble, white with veins? So then, okay, let's buy Calcutta slabs at $20,000 a slab and put that on a building with veins and all that stuff. That's probably not a good idea. But guess what? We could come in with thin porcelain slabs that look exactly like calicut or exactly like concrete or exactly like travertine or exactly like a metallized cement, and cut it to whatever size you want at a cost for the material that's very low. I mean, very, very low. And then all the money really is put into the ventilated system, I would guess, and the labor and all that good stuff. But the cost of the material is not phenomenal. And talk about your accountant maintenance. If you have a limestone building in Manhattan and there's a zillion of them, you know, sometimes they get grungy looking, right? Because they're porous and you know,
soaking up the smog.
Yeah. A porcelain building, you literally just need to power wash it. I mean, nothing else. You don't seal it. You don't do anything to it. And I think if I build a building, it's going to be in porcelain.
Well, we got to get Rick's approval because he's a shareholder.
He's in for $10.
He's in for. You're right. And I've done a couple of stone exteriors here in Raleigh and Charlotte, and sometimes, we would put the nicer stone at the bottom. And then as you got higher, you'd get lower quality stone. And then sometimes they'd just switch over to metal panels or some other thing, because the farther you're away from it, you can't see the difference in quality. And then, you know, at some point it doesn't make a difference. But with a porcelain or a ventilated facade, you know, based on porcelain, you can use the same quality all the way up. It's an easier install. It's an easier repair. And like you said, the maintenance is so easy.
Well, what about the weight? What's the weight of a porcelain slab versus a piece of limestone that's 2 centimeter, 3 centimeter or more thick, right?
Yeah, that's like the difference in weight between me and a bus. It's significant. You know, a porcelain panel, 60 by 120 or whatever it is, I don't know, what does it weigh, 2 or 3 pounds maybe
per square foot, 2 to 3 pounds per square foot. Yeah,
probably. For a porcelain.
Yeah, and a stone would be 8 to 15 pounds per square foot, right? Yeah. So
I mean, the ease of install is
the handling of it. And forget about. Well, in addition to the labor, think about the structural demands on the building. Think about the architecture, the architect that needs to build into the system to hold this and then hold the wind load and hold the rain. And so thin porcelain is really the way to go. We did speak to a factory about this yesterday, and we asked a question about why in the U.S. it's not as far advanced as it is in Europe. And we got two interesting, we got 2 replies that were kind of what we anticipated. One was people are always concerned about it not being done properly and falling off. Like you could paint the building, you don't have to worry about pieces falling off. But with these systems, they're very safe. The other thing was flat out simple. It just started in Europe much sooner than it did in the U.S. and it takes time for it to come around. What do you think?
I agree, and it seems like we had this conversation. We're always a little bit behind the Europeans, especially in our industry, the tile and stone industry. And I will say, as the thin gauge porcelains in combination with the ventilated facades was like a double whammy. Nobody was familiar with the thin gauge porcelains. They were scared of those. Nobody was familiar with how to install tile on a railing system unless you were used to stonework. So they were scared of that. And them together, they were like terrified. And, tile installers, I love them. I am one of them. But a lot of them are very reluctant to change. So they didn't want to step out and be the trendsetter because they were scared of the liability. So a lot of times they would blow the budget up with labor because they didn't know how to do it. And that's where it was when I was in the contracting industry. And we're coming out of that some because I'm seeing more of it. Specified, like I said, my buddy Alex, who installs it today, he made himself a niche. He learned it. And he's been driving all over the country installing it because he wasn't scared of the liability. And bless him. And I hope he gets some projects, and he can donate to our building fund.
Well, you know what? When somebody's building a new building now, with the innovation of these thin gauge porcelains, and I'm sure the metal has evolved. I'm sure the glass has evolved. Right? We talked about the glass that could generate, some energy for you, or capture some heat. I'm sure every industry has technological advances that we're not even familiar with because we're not in those industries. But when it comes to building a building, if you want your building to look like marble, and it doesn't have to be marble, if you want it to look like concrete, all those things, we can do that with porcelain, with the technology that we have, where I can't see that happening with glass or with metal. Like, there's only so much you can do with those materials. And
we have metal. The only thing you're going to do is paint it.
Right. Different texture, different color. Okay, great. But you can't have it look like white Carrara marble, right? Or travertine. Yeah. And you can even print images on porcelain, right? You could do.
Absolutely.
We have in the Tile Bar headquarter showroom, flagship showroom, in our conference room, we have thin gauge porcelain on the wall. It's huge. And it's the skyline of New York City. That would be cool. A building that the skyline of, it's actually in the skyline of New York City, with an image of the skyline of New York City in it.
Maybe we could get New York to give us a grant to build, to buy the building, and Rick gets a really small closet.
Look, for $10, all Rick's getting to pick is the design of the street number on the building. That's all the input he's getting.
That's it for $10. But just to quickly recap, because I know we're running out of time here. My drink's almost empty. Just the exterior facade with porcelain or ceramic tile, even those things are what we're talking. The aesthetics, the durability, low maintenance, moisture resistant, energy efficient, fire resistant.
Yeah.
And sustainable. I get that question a lot. Is my tile fireproof? Yeah, it is.
Well, it's fired at 2,000 degrees, right? So about 1,200 degrees Celsius, probably or more. So no issue there whatsoever. And the firm that I met with recently, talking about exteriors, young group of people, really super talented and knowledgeable. One of the first questions out of their mouths was sustainability. Literally, it's important. It is, but the generation that's below us, they're living and breathing sustainable. And tile is pretty much clay, water, and heat, right? And
it can all be reused. If you salvage your tile from your building, your house, or whatever, it can be ground up and remade into another tile. I lost you, John. What happened? Well, John froze, or either I'm frozen. I'm not sure, but we were talking about sustainability of the of tile, and it is one of the most sustainable. And we hope that you take advantage of that. And also, LEED credits are there. And if you're using a domestic manufacturer or a domestic thing, we can that was my wife texting me that John froze. Then you can get LEED credits for that. So sustainability is a big deal, and that big deal, it means something for when you are on it. Hey, John, we're still online. John's on the phone calling in.
Wow. So I just said goodbye to everybody. It was because I could see nothing.
Yeah, well, John evidently did not pay his cable bill. So, John, I'm going to close this out here in just a second. But you're okay?
I am good. I'd like to wish everybody peace, health, and happiness. And we'll see you next week.
All right, John. John said he's off now, but he said he'd like to wish us peace, health, and happiness, and he's going to see us next week. But as we close out on facades are really cool. If you're a designer, Ask the right questions, prepare, and if you need help with specifications, that's what we're here for. Contact us. Sonia, thanks for joining us. You're very close to being able to start happy hour, because we're going to end up happy hour this week on facades, and we're going to talk later about that. Don't forget to follow us on all of our social media, and send us comments. Like and subscribe if you haven't already. We love these conversations about the tile industry, about what's going on, and we'll talk about anything you want to. So send us your comments. I look forward to seeing you, and let's always remember to keep learning and tile the world.